The Sports Renegades podcast on SportsTownChicago.com. Welcome back to the Sports Renegades here on SportsTownChicago.com. I'm Ryan Stuprich.
And I'm Ryan Risky.
And for the first segment, we talked about the Cubs. We talked about Jason Hayward and how a lot of Cubs fans are starting to freak out about Jason Hayward.
It's the same situation as John Lester was in last year. He was terrible the first 2 months, and people were acting like he's the worst pitcher in the game.
Yeah, so,
calm down.
There's no need to panic. They're still the best team in baseball at this point, 28-11. We're going to focus our attention now to the NBA and NHL playoffs, which have been actually very exciting. We'll start with the NBA, especially the first two games in the NBA. That game one against Golden State with the Thunder and Golden State Warriors, that was very entertaining. It was really cool to see the Thunder pull that off.
It was. I mean, then, of course, the Warriors went and obliterated them in Game 2.
Pretty much, yeah.
It was a good game. I mean, I was stunned when the Thunder won. I mean, and it didn't matter how badly the Thunder lost in Game 2. They did what they needed to do. They needed to win one game in Golden State.
Right.
Doesn't matter how bad they lost in Game 2. They're ready for Games 3 and 4 at home.
Yeah, they played really well in that Game 1. It was sort of a tale of two halves. In the first half, Kevin Durant was doing really well, and then in that second half, Russell Westbrook went off. Nobody could stop him. He was getting to the hoop and everything, and then KD had that clutch shot with like 40-something seconds left to put the Thunder up by 5. And the Thunder, of course, tried to blow it. They missed a couple free throws. They gave the Warriors some life, but they held on in that Game 1. And, yeah, and like you said, they did their job. They took one of two.
That's all they needed to do.
Right, and now they go back to Oklahoma City. I would not be surprised. I think both of these games, 3 and 4 in OKC, I think they're both going to be competitive.
I think that it's going to be split, and it'll be 2-2 heading back to Game 5 in Golden State.
That's probably what I would say, too. I don't see the Warriors winning both games in Oklahoma City, although obviously that's more likely than Oklahoma City winning both games.
That was more likely than Oklahoma City winning a game at Golden State.
Yeah, true. So, it'll be really interesting. Of course, I love the Thunder head coach. His last name's Donovan. He came from Florida. He was there for 15 years almost, as it seemed. And he's done really well. He's much better than Scott Brooks, obviously.
Yeah, one of his assistants was Monty Williams, who you wanted the Bulls to hire in the off season. And then when he had a death in the family, I think he stepped back for the rest of the season.
Yeah, so I mean, it's been really exciting to watch how competitive that series is. Obviously, it's more competitive than the Eastern Conference Finals between the Cavs and the Raptors. The Cavs killed the Raptors a few days ago.
Cleveland hasn't lost a game this postseason.
No, they still have not lost a game, which is crazy.
I mean, I don't think Cleveland can beat Golden State or Oklahoma City. So I don't think that.
I don't know.
I don't think they can. I know they're playing really well. It's just they have not played any sort of competition that's as close to as good as those teams. I don't even think they could have beaten the Spurs.
The problem with the Cavs is they were not healthy last year, but they're 100% pretty much healthy this year. And they swept the Pistons, and that was actually impressive in itself that they swept, and then they swept the Hawks, which was more likely to happen probably.
I wonder how badly they would have beaten the Bulls if they had made the playoffs.
I know it would have been a sweep for sure.
And speaking of the Bulls, their disastrous season was rewarded with the 14th pick in the NBA draft.
Yes, they get the 14th pick, and deservedly so, and they also made a couple moves. They fired that the person in charge of I think she's in charge of training or something. Jen Swanson. She's the person that Derrick Rose personally wanted. And she's, screwed everything up. Everything that they've done with the training staff has been horrible ever since the 2000s.
You mean they actually realized that they needed a better medical staff?
Yeah, and I think they let go a couple other people too. So they're starting to get things in order a little bit.
Not really. The front office the clowns in the front office are still there, and Fred Hoiberg is still the coach.
Well, the clowns will never leave. Hoiberg won't leave, and unless it really gets bad in a couple years, he wouldn't leave.
I doubt he'll leave. I'm sure when his contract is up, Gar Forman and John Paxson will be rushing to get an extension done. Actually, I'm sure that by year 3, they'll be trying to get another 5-year extension done.
And, of course, meanwhile, the Orlando Magic hired Frank Vogel as their head coach, which I thought was a very good move.
That's a very good move.
They think it's an excellent move. I think he's a very good coach. I don't know why Larry Bird in Indiana ever let him go.
They wanted more offense. And honestly, if I was the Bulls, they should have fired Hoiberg to hire him. Frank Vogel is a very good coach.
Yeah, he is a very good coach. But, of course, Hoiberg's their guy, Ryan, so they're never going to – they're not going to get rid of him for a while.
They'll never get rid of him. The Bulls management probably wants him there until he retires.
And we know Paxson's not going anywhere. The next move would be firing Gar Forman, but
and I don't think
obviously
that's
him and John Paxson are friends and they get along and whatever. So
honestly, those two are like a 1-2 package. Like you can't have one without the other. It has to be both. Like with most teams, they all have like a GM or their vice president of basketball operations. With the Bulls, it's those two clowns.
Yeah. And now, there's been rumors. I don't think anything will come of it, but there's been rumors that the Celtics are still actively pursuing Jimmy Butler.
They do have the number 3 pick in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, even if they don't get Jimmy Butler, which they probably won't because the Bulls don't want to get rid of him, I mean, imagine how good they're going to be with that 3rd pick that they got. I mean, they're going to be really good come next season, the Boston Celtics. It's going to be, I think, they're going to be right up there with the Cavs. I think the Raptors might fall a little bit, and I think you're going to see the Cavs and Celtics as early favorites for the top 2 teams in the East.
That would be something, though, if the Bulls would trade Jimmy Butler for Boston. If maybe they could get a package of like Jared Sullinger and that 3rd pick, and then use that 3rd pick to draft Brandon Ingram, a point guard out of Duke, and then you could say goodbye to Derrick Rose.
Well, I think they're going to say goodbye to Rose anyway.
You'd really have like a good successor.
If they sign him again after next year, I'm going to kill myself. I mean, it is unbelievable. He cannot be on this team in 2017-2018. He cannot be on this team. And I don't know what other team is going to take him. He thinks he can get a lot of money, and he's foolish. He's an idiot. But, I mean, it's ridiculous to think that he'd ever be back to where he once was. He's not even that young anymore. He's like... he's not close to 30, but I
think he's 27.
Yeah, he's in his late 20s. He's, he's approaching his late 20s. He's, especially with basketball, he's out of his prime. Unless you're like LeBron James or something, then you don't really have a prime.
The funny thing is he should have been entering the best years of his career. I mean, with as good as he was that MVP year, he could have been even better by this time, except then those injuries happened, those knee surgeries, and he's just not the same player.
And he hired the medical staff that didn't know how to handle him. So you also got that going for you. But I would not be shocked if the Bulls went full rebuild, but they're not going to.
Never. John Paxson.
So I don't think Jimmy Butler's going anywhere.
John Paxson. Well, here's the thing. It seems like Butler and Hoiberg don't see eye to eye, and John Paxson and Gar Forman will pick Fred Hoiberg over any player.
Yeah. Now they didn't do that with Tom Thibodeau, but they'll do that with Hoiberg.
And the thing is, like, it seems like John Paxson has an issue with every former Bulls coach. Was it Scott Skiles he fired on Christmas or the day before Christmas?
He fired him on Christmas Eve.
On Christmas Eve because he got mad at him. He got into a fight with Vinny Del Negro, got into a fight with Tom Thibodeau. Maybe it's not the coaches, Jerry Reinsdorf. Maybe it's your clowns in the front office.
Yeah, well, now to our credit, it was time for Scott Skiles to move on, I agree. But
it's every coach
Vinny
they
Del
have.
Negro it was not a good coach, and he still isn't, and that's why he's not coaching. But
it's every coach they have gets into a fight with John Paxson, and then he fires them.
Yeah.
And Jerry Reinsdorf doesn't realize that John Paxson isn't the problem. or is the problem.
Jerry,
Tom Thibodeau was not the problem. He was one of the best coaches in the NBA.
Of course not. Tom Thibodeau was not the problem, and he's going to have a lot of success in Minnesota, and I wish he does do well.
I wish him a lot of success just to rub it in Gar Forman and John Paxson's face.
And also, I like the Timberwolves. I love their young team that they have, and it would be nice for them to get back to relevancy. They haven't been to the playoffs since 2004, so I think that would be a really good story. And Tom Thibodeau is sort of in charge of everything. He's also like the president of basketball operations up there.
And as I've said multiple times, it's safe to assume that there will be no trade discussions between the Timberwolves and the Bulls.
No, I don't think so. I'm sure if they ever called, Tom Thibodeau would hang up the phone right away. So it's interesting the way that this Bulls team is going. They're very old. Especially with Pau Gasol and Mirotic, he played overseas for years before he came over.
Well, Mirotic is very young, though. I think he's like 24.
Yeah, I mean, he's young, but he also has some playing experience overseas. I feel like in the long run that's going to hurt him because he hasn't been playing in the NBA that long.
His contract is also up at the end of this season. He signed a 3-year deal.
I know.
And, I mean, he's kind of making a lot of money, and it's going to be hard to give him a bigger contract because he hasn't done anything to earn that contract where, another team will come in and offer him a big deal. I mean, maybe the Timberwolves will, and Tom Thibodeau will offer him a big deal to come play for them, except I don't know about that because they have Karl Anthony Towns as their center. Although they don't have a power forward, do they? They've been using Garnett.
Well, they do have a couple people. I don't know. I mean, they're pretty much stacked. They just needed the right coach, and now that they got it, I think they'll be okay. But yeah, as far as the Bulls are, it's tough to talk about them because we don't know what's going to happen really. And I have a feeling
what should happen, and almost everyone agrees. Everyone, all sports analysts, all fans agree that on the same things that should happen, except the people that don't agree with that are John Paxson and Gar Forman.
Yeah, they still think they can compete with the team that they have, and they can't go anywhere. I mean, they're never going to be in the Eastern Conference Finals with the roster they have. There's too many good teams in the East.
They're having a hard time making the playoffs.
Yeah, and, let alone the playoffs, as you said. But yeah, going back to wrap up the NBA, and then we'll talk about the NHL quickly. Yeah, the NBA, the Eastern Conference Finals, Cavs and Raptors. I think the Cavs will win that in like 5 games. I think I'll give Toronto a game, but I think the Cavs win in 5.
Toronto's a team on the rise. I think they'll be back in the spot next year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think they'll go deep. And then Western Conference Finals, Warriors and Thunder. That's going to be a hell of a game tomorrow, and I think, I think like you said, I think it's going to be 2-2 going back to Golden State.
I mean, that's a series that could go to 7 games, or maybe the Warriors can wrap it up in Oklahoma City in Game 6.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about hockey real quick. You got the Blues and the Sharks tonight. They split in St. Louis.
Martin Jones coming off of a shutout in Game 2.
So I'm very excited. I hope San Jose can win tonight. I want them to go to the Stanley Cup.
They're a great story. I mean, they were we weren't even sure if they'd make the playoffs at one point, and they're just a great team that got hot at the right time. Martin Jones has been great. Logan Couture has 18 points in the playoffs. I believe he set a Sharks franchise record for playoff points in a single postseason, and he's been terrific. I think they'll be able to take down the Blues in 6 or 7 games. It's going to be a hard-fought series, though.
I hope you're right. I hope they go to the Stanley Cup.
And they'll probably be playing the Penguins.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the Lightning are again without Ben Bishop for Game 4.
I feel like if the Lightning were at full strength, it would be more competitive.
Steven Stamkos is unsure if he'll play this season. So, I mean, they just have too much uncertainty, and the Penguins are pretty hot right now. So I think we'll be seeing the Sharks and the Penguins in the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, either way, it's going to be very exciting. All these Eastern and Western Conference matchups for the NBA and NHL have been more exciting than in years past, that's for sure, except for the NHL when, of course,
the NHL,
like the Blackhawks to be
it's almost always exciting in hockey, though, because it seems like there's always multiple series going to Game 7, and it's just so fun to watch. Like, the Hawks and the Ducks last year was one of the greatest series ever.
Oh, man, I know that was awesome. And to win a Game 7 in Anaheim the way that they did was just outstanding.
That was one of the greatest series that I've ever watched. I mean, it was just so fun. Like, I think it was Game 5, the Hawks were down by 2, and then they pulled the goalie, and then Taves scored twice in the final couple minutes with the extra attacker to send it to overtime, and then they ended up losing, except that's really just the kind of game that sums up that series.
All right, that's going to do it for us today. I'm Ryan Stuprich.
And I'm Ryan Risky.
We will talk to you next week. Have a great night. The Sports Renegades Podcast on SportsTownChicago.com.